Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew DeSantis.
And I'm Kaylie Shapiro.
And welcome to another episode of the NYRA Bets Road to the Kentucky Derby.
And the Kentucky Oaks.
Well, hey, everyone. Hope all of you are doing well for a jam-packed weekend of Derby and Oaks coverage, joined in person here at Aqueduct by my colleague, Kaylie Shapiro. We are here to talk about the Derby and Oaks preps that are taking place this week at Fairgrounds and Turfway Park. But before we get to that, want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos are dropping on the channel, whether that be weekly programs like this one, race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, and so much more. Kaylie, this is a big weekend. We got the 100-point preps.
Yes.
The big guns have come out,
yes.
And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch these horses run this weekend.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Obviously, there's a lot of great racing taking place, even outside of Derby preps like Sierra Leone. But in terms of what we're covering, obviously Good Cheer is a big name that we're excited to see this week. And she's going to head for her 100 points this week. So that will be a lot of fun to see. And some other fillies that are in that group that are either going to take a step up or coming back second off layoffs, room for improvement. So I think after this round of preps, we should at least have a little more of a solid vision of, who maybe those top dogs are besides that big main group on top.
Yeah, I agree with you about that. I think that things will come into a little bit of clarity as we start to kind of get a better sense of who's going to be in, who's going to be out, obviously. And then some of these horses might assert themselves. We saw a little bit of that with Quiet Side, winning the fantasy, or I'm sorry, winning the prep at Oaklawn Park.
Maybe.
And, maybe. Yeah, exactly. We'll see if she's able to do it in a couple of weeks. So listen, let's dive into this 4 races. We'll start with the Fairgrounds, look at the Fairgrounds Oaks, the Louisiana Derby, which I think is wide open. And then we'll take a look at the Jeff Ruby Stakes as well as the Bourbonette Oaks. But let's start with what is going to be the main card this weekend, which is at Fairgrounds, 12 race card. If you're watching this, you can also check out my Capping the Card episode where I go race 1 through 12 with my top pick and top value play. But Kaylie, this race kind of starts and stops in terms of the Fairground Oaks with your opinion of Good Cheer. She is undefeated. She has never really been tested in any way, shape, or form. What are your thoughts on this one, and what are your thoughts on this race overall?
Well, obviously, first looking at the race, you're going to try to beat Good Cheer. I wasn't able to find a way. I genuinely believe, like you just said, this filly still hasn't even really been asked for her best. She improved her buyer speed figure last time out with an 89, which was her career best. And on paper, that race doesn't look like it was that tough for her. But if we remember that day, she was up against the pace. She got blocked in on the rail. As soon as she got the room to go, she took off and, she won dominantly even after having trouble in the race. So for me, she's the strong single in the sequence, even more so than Sierra Leone if there are scratches in that race. So that was nice. This is a strong single. This is just a dominant filly in every way. And besides what you see on paper, she's just a really big competitor. She has a really competitive energy about her. She's an intelligent filly. I really like her. She towers over the entire field.
Yeah, it's hard for me to get around her as well. I thought if you're going to try to beat her, last time was the time to do it, coming off a little bit of the bench. And, that race was never going to come back with a high buyer speed figure because of the nature of a 4-horse race and the fact they were trying to really kind of walk the dog up front a little bit. And then you also had a combination of them trying to box her in for a long stretch of the time. But once she got clear, it was see you later. I mean, nobody was going to get close to her, and nobody's really gotten close to her in any of her 5 starts. And the thing is, it's not like she's some gate to wire speedball. She's a horse that's very patient, can sit off the pace, and notably was a really speed favoring track last time out and was one of the few horses that was able to come from a little off the pace. So she was running against the track as much as her main competitors. She's a single for me in this sequence. And, it's a single and move on to the next race from a vertical or horizontal standpoint.
I completely agree. And we might even see a better performance from her this time around. She might have some pace to run at in front of her as well, more so than in her last start. So I think she might even improve off that last figure that we saw.
Oh, I think she's sitting on a mid-90 sort of a number. I think that's what you're going to, That's what I expect her to sort of run in this race. Now, a horse that you like a little bit that is also second back from a little bit of a layoff is Tom Amos's Quickick. 10-1 on the morning line. This is a horse that, ran, I thought, really well in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Came back, was a little disappointing in the Honeybee with a 5th place finish, but now, like I was saying, second back from a layoff, could continue to move forward.
Yeah, I have this filly underneath in second. I really think that she's going to improve second back off a layoff. Honeybee, I mean, I wasn't that disappointed by her performance. I mean, she didn't really finish up that well, but at least, she didn't run poorly that day, especially first off a layoff. And we hadn't seen her since the Breeders' Cup before that. So, and honestly, I think with some more pace in front of her on Saturday as well, she's going to be able to close effectively. She's a filly that likes to come from way out of it. So I think that she's really going to benefit from the long stretch at Fairgrounds as well.
Yeah.
And any more ground that she can get in front of her.
Yeah, no, that long stretch it definitely, should be a help. Tyler Gaffleone up, taking over for Dylan Davis. And yeah, listen, I think she certainly has every opportunity to step forward in this next race, with this being second back. But I will say she does give me a little bit of like Hoosier Philly vibes a little bit in terms of another Tom Amos filly who didn't really move forward necessarily from 2 to 3. The 72 buyer speed figure off the bench was not, it basically ran back very similar to a Breeders' Cup Juvenile number. We'll have to see if she can move forward. But I think, 10-1 certainly presents very good value in this race and in terms of using a horse underneath with good cheer.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think that will tell a lot about her, how she performs on Saturday. I have to give her one more shot. I mean, she showed a lot of class as a 2-year-old. And again, second back off a layoff. Got to give her a shot here, especially at that price. Yeah,
a horse that I'm going to continue to give a shot to is my second choice, Her Laugh, for Whip Beckman with Irad Ortiz Jr. up. This one just showed me a lot in that Suncoast. And this is an example of where I think speed figures don't tell the whole story is, this is a horse that went gate to wire in the Untappable going 1.70 and then went to the Suncoast against Lucara. And everybody was expecting that to be a duel up on the front end. And what ended up happening was she threw her head at the start. She was dead last. She was 10 lengths behind everybody early on. And this is a horse that does her best work up front. And for her to really dig down and pass everybody in the field other than Lucara, who just was able to go gate to wire with a very easy lead that day, I thought showed me a lot. It showed her another dimension. Yes, she had come from off the pace in her maiden breaking win, but that was at 6 furlongs. So being able to show that she can come from off the pace, pass a lot of horses, going 2 turns. We're going a little bit further in 1 1/16, but I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue here. And I just think a 12-1, this one is a horse that I think is going to run a big race on Saturday. And I think, again, I can sit a couple different types of trips now. Could go to the front, but doesn't need to get caught up in a pace battle if something emerges in that space.
Yeah, I agree. I was impressed by her trip in the Suncoast after missing the break, the way that she was able to make up ground. And I think that she's going to be a big pace presence in here. I guess the other filly that you're going to look at when you're talking about Her Laugh is probably Ahavah, who's the half to Vava in here, who should be the other main pace presence. I mean, I heard little things about maybe they plan on rating her here. So I guess we'll have to see. But I think it's really going to depend on if Ahavah wants to lead, how Her Laugh is going to sit a trip. But I was impressed by that last performance. And the distance today should really be no concern. Just getting that extra 16th of a mile. But in terms of Oaks distance, definitely some questions in the future. But today she has enough speed to get herself into the mix and should be able to sit a nice trip. So I have Her Laugh in third.
Yeah, and I think Ahavah, a horse we both have kind of lower on our tickets here, is she's such a big question mark because the pedigree is huge. Obviously, the half to Vava, who is a great sprinter, and Cherie DeVoe and Jose Ortiz, those two are only winning 44% of their amounts and their races together during this fairgrounds meet. So that's not so bad. But listen, this is a tough spot. This horse is stepping up from running in 6 furlongs with Lasix to now doing 2 turns and a grade 2 without Lasix. Yeah. That's a lot.
And she ran a fast opening quarter that day. She's obviously the fastest horse in here that we see on paper, but she did get a bit of breathing room. throughout the rest of the race. So that was something that I noted, that I don't really think she's going to get the same breathing room come Saturday.
I hear you on that. And I think that, she's 8-1. I don't think you get 8-1. I think the connections, the pedigree are going to have this horse getting bet down. She'll probably be second choice at 5-1, I would imagine, something along those lines. So, at that price, I'm just not really interested in finding out whether or not she can stretch out. I think she's a horse that it wouldn't shock me if she goes to the lead. Like you said, she'll be up there. And then I think she can kind of fade late potentially in this race. But certainly a horse I think that has a very bright future. Just because she doesn't win this race doesn't mean I don't think she's a really nice horse. I think she could follow in the steps of her sister and just become a really great sprinter as well.
I guess we'll just have to take the wait and see. I know that they tried stretching Vava out, I think, in the beginning of her career as well. So that's also pretty interesting. I guess we'll see how she runs on Saturday. But in terms of a horse that I wanted to put in fourth, out of the rest of this group, Bless the Broken is a scratch. I looked towards Gowells Delight, who I think that I can trust more than a lot of other horses in this field. That the distance isn't going to be a problem for her. And that they opted to send her here instead of the Virginia Oaks, which speaks to a little bit of confidence. And they, Kenny McPeak did say, we know that we're facing a monster and good cheer, but it is an 100-point prep. So if this filly's able to pick up second or third, that serves her pretty well. So I think that she should be at least a little bit competitive against this field.
Absolutely. No, I think she's one who makes a lot of sense in this field. I think, I have her third. I think that, she absolutely fits here. I think you're making a good point about, Kenny opting not to run in that Virginia Oaks and coming down here instead. And, if you finish second, it's the equivalent of winning the Virginia Oaks. So from a point standpoint, so listen, maybe you just give the victory to Good Cheer and you go, listen, if we can run second here, that's maybe better than trying to figure out how to run, a winning trip at Virginia and Colonial Downs and a one-turn race. That's a different dynamic. And so, I think Gowells Delight makes a lot of sense here. It's 8-1. It's probably going to be your, kind of the second, third choice. We'll see about Secret Faith. That's a horse that's cross-entered in the Crescent City Oaks earlier in the card. So we'll see if this one actually runs in this race or the other one. And that could be a dynamic as well.
Yeah, that's something to pay attention to because that filly has a lot of speed as well. So she is a scratch. Does shake things up a little bit for horses like Her Laugh and Ahavah as well.
Yeah, I think it makes things a little bit easier for Her Laugh because you would imagine Ahavah goes out and Her Laugh just kind of sits right off of that at that point. So, it'll be an interesting dynamic to see for sure. But listen, let's get to the headliner on Saturday at Fairgrounds, and that is the Grade 2 Louisiana Derby going 1 mile 3/16, the longest domestic prep race. I say that because the UAE Derby is also 1 mile 3/16. But this is a field of 10. And Kaylie, I feel like this is a race where you could make a legitimate case for probably 7 or 8 of these horses. This feels like a very wide open race. You ultimately went to a horse that is 5-1 on the morning line for Dwayne Lucas Caldera, coming off of what was a really gutsy effort in the Sunland Derby last time out against Getaway Car. But this is a horse that's been training lights out for the coach.
Yeah, and if you look at his numbers, I mean, he's just improving with every start. Typical Dwayne Lucas horse. And this was actually the horse that he thought was the better of his Derby contenders before American Promise last week.
Yeah.
This horse is 5-1 on the morning line in a wide open race. This horse, broke his maiden against Older. And then I know everyone is going to look at how Getaway Car ran back last weekend and probably choose to play against this horse. But I mean, I don't really see the reason to. I think that he ran a good race that day. He was able to chase and get after Getaway Car. And I think that he's going to be able to sit a nice trip on Saturday as well. He has, great pedigree. And also he gets Tyler Gaffleone aboard, which is, a pretty big jockey upgrade. And I think that at 5-1 on the morning line, why not take a shot with this one?
Yeah, I mean, this is a race where you and I are just going to disagree. I mean, we just have two completely different ways of looking at this race, which is fine because I think very reasonable people can look at this race two completely different ways. Caldera is one of my first tosses in this race because I look at that Getaway Car performance. I think that is very indicative of the caliber of horse that this one was running against in the Sunland Derby. They were 9 lengths clear of Touchy. Touchy's nowhere to be seen right now, and the rest of the field we're not even going to talk about in that Sunland Derby. So I don't know what really was getting beaten that day out there. So I just have questions about that. Liam's Map. I don't love that horse. I don't love that sire influence stretching out up top. You do have the Tisnow underneath, and the female family is pretty strong.
Look at the breeder.
Yeah, absolutely. No, John Albert. Yeah, absolutely. So this is also a My Racehorse. So I don't know if you're really going to get 5-1 because all the My Racehorse people and the 18,000 owners of this horse are going to be placing, at the very least $2 show bets, but probably $20 win bets. And so, that's one of the concerns that I have there. And so horses trading lights out for Lucas. We should mention 59-1 Bullet on March 6th, 59-3 Bullet on March 14th. So the horse is training very, very well under that hard regimen from D. Wayne. But I have some questions because I think there's a lot of speed in this race.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that if he is able to get a clean break and maybe sit off a couple, or if he does go to the lead, I mean, who knows? I think there's a couple of ways that I could see this horse winning. But I definitely do note that he is maturing at a pretty fast rate as well.
Yep.
And I think, I'm going to take a shot, even though Getaway Car, I don't really read as heavily into that performance. Obviously, Getaway Car isn't as great as maybe we all hoped, but he's not a bad horse. He's pretty
that's
fast
your opinion.
as well. So.
I think he's a mediocre horse. But we'll see. We'll see. Caldera is a horse that I think is very divisive. I think some people are very bullish on Caldera. I think some people are very cold. You're bullish. I'm cold, and that's okay. We'll see. And I think that one of the keys, though, is we're both playing against the morning line favorite in this race, who is John Hancock.
Yeah.
And that's a horse that, I think we both think, because we both have the horse in our top 4, but I think we both think that this horse, there are some questions to answer with this horse a little bit.
Yeah, I have this horse in second. I probably even, in a wide open race, I wasn't going to play the favorite, especially when I can come up with cases for other horses in here. So I have him second.
Yeah.
But this horse, he seems to have a lot of talent. I mean, if you look at on debut, we got an 81 with Lasix, and then last time stretched out right away and ran without Lasix and won. And I think it flatters him that Owen Almighty finished second to him that day, who we saw come back and obviously win. And Owen Almighty's a pretty fast horse, and this horse got the lead in that race. And that was something I noted. I think obviously he's going to send from the rail. I have him on my pick 5 ticket. I went, I think 5 deep here, but he's a horse that I think you absolutely have to have on your pick 5 ticket.
He's a horse, again, I have very strong opinions about John Hancock, and that I think he could win this race. I wouldn't be shocked if he won this race. I absolutely hate him at this price at 7-2 at the morning line favorite. Get out of here. This horse is tied for having the lowest career buyer speed figure in this entire field. Only Furio has another 84. Literally every other horse in this field has run faster than John Hancock. That 84 in the Sam F. Davis was entirely aided by a speed favoring track. Owen Almighty did come back to win. Oh, by the way, on a speed favoring track in a race where he got an easy lead. Brad Cox has been doing nothing but disappointing with his colts this year. Rapture, Tappan Street, Patch Adams. They're not coming through. So I just have a hard time thinking here's a horse with 2 career starts who was aided on a speed favoring track in the Sam F. Davis. Now you're facing some legitimate speed because there's a horse like Furio in this race who's also a bit of a speedball on the outside. That horse is going straight to the front. You know that. You have a horse like Built and Vassimo who are both getting blinkers on. You have a horse like Yinzer who went straight to the lead last time out in gate-to-wire fashion. You figure that's the only way that horse can probably win the race. And then, oh, by the way, like you mentioned, Caldera's going to be up there. So John Hancock's going to have a whole lot of company up front. And he's a horse I think is just going to get burned up in this race. And the Cox horses have not been firing on the boy side as good as they are on the filly side. They've just not been coming through for the colts. And so a little bit of a play against for me.
Yeah, I could see the potential of that. But just because we've seen him get both of his wins up on the front end doesn't mean that he can't rate. I guess we'll find out on Saturday. I wonder what they're planning on doing. You imagine
they got to go to the lead.
Of course. From where he drew, but if he doesn't happen to get it, who knows? Maybe he's still able to sit a nice trip. But he's just a horse that is obviously very lightly raced, only has 2 starts, and I think has a lot of potential. I never was a fan of Patch Adams. I played against him constantly, but this one was the one that I honestly preferred
Yeah, the Cox horses. No, it makes sense. Sired by Constitution. I mean, a good pedigree in terms of up top influence for getting 2 turns and going a little longer. Ultimately, I went with a horse that has no pedigree and that you and I could have easily bought a couple of years ago for $2,500 at the Fasig-Tipton Keeneland October sale in 2023. Chunk of Gold sold for a whopping $2,500. Now, it's notable that his full sibling, Band of Gold, won the Martha Washington a year later. So I have a hard time thinking that he would have been for $2,500 if he had gone up for sale in 2024 because of that pedigree. Sired by Preservationist out of a Cairo Prince mare. This is one who it gives me a little bit of Two Phils vibes because this is a horse that won on synthetic in debut, stepped up in the Leonidas, ran second that day to Baby Max, who came back to run a very competitive second in the John Battaglia next time out. Then goes to the Risen Star and runs a 92 buyer. And I think there's a lot of pace in this race. This is a horse that came from off the pace that day to run second. Remember, Magnitude was that runaway winner in that race with a huge buyer speed figure, won by 9 3/4 lengths. Chunk of Gold finished second. He beat the best of the rest. He beat Built. He beat Vassimo. He beat American Promise, who we saw come back to win the Virginia Derby. He beat Render Judgment, who we saw come back to run second in the Virginia Derby. So he beat a lot of nice horses that day. Smaller connections in terms of Ethan West, Jareth Loveberry. That's another reason I get the Two Phils vibes because that was, of course, the jockey of Two Phils. This horse is trading out nicely at Turfway Park. Listen, I get it. Small connections, questionable pedigree, no sales price. This horse is probably going to get overlooked, but I think this horse gets the setup. And I just think there's going to be so much pace. And what have we seen in recent years? Whether it was Sierra Leone and the Risen Star, whether it was Catching Freedom and Honor Marie last year in the Louisiana Derby, coming from off the pace and winning this race. You can close on this track when it's playing fair and the weather should be nice. It's going to, I think, be playing a little bit more fairly. And we're going a mile and 3/16. I think some of these horses are going to be fading late. Chunk of Gold, I think, is a horse that's going to be making a big run. So taking a bit of a shot there. But a horse that we both like a little bit in our top 3 and 4, I have second, you have third, is Built. And I think this is a horse that I really like. Getting blinkers on, but has shown the ability to pass horses, sit a couple different types of trips, bounce back with, I thought, a strong third place effort, just getting headed out for second by Chunk of Gold in that Risen Star for Wayne Catalano, 4-1 on the morning line, but I feel like he might get overlooked a little bit.
I think so. And on the contrary, look at this one's pedigree. I think that he's just going to continue to improve with more ground.
Oh my God.
Blinkers on. This was the one that I preferred out of, a few in here that can come from off the pace.
Yeah.
I think that this horse's run figures good enough, to improve off of and get a win here.
Yeah.
Has run some of the best figures of this group.
Yeah.
I understand the Chunk of Gold thing. I do want to wait and see. I know that buyer last time out was, the horse Magnitude ran what? That
like 108, I think, or something like that.
So kind of want to wait and see. The horse, debuted on the synthetic, and I don't know. I kind of just want to wait and see. But I looked at this one as one that I really like that can come from off the pace and gets blinkers on, which should be interesting as well. Yeah. And I think he's going to appreciate the added distance as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. A hard spot out of a curling mare. He's going to want to go all day. And so I don't have any questions about that. Yeah, exactly. Jose's up on this one. So, God, he's winning 29% of his mounts at Fairgrounds this meet. So I think pretty serious. Now, another one who is getting blinkers on as well is Vassimo. And this is one I like a little bit more underneath. But this is one for Todd Pletcher. Fits the sort of profile I like to see in a horse, which is a young horse, lightly raced. A little bit of what you were saying with John Hancock, actually. A lightly raced horse that keeps getting better. 73, 81, 89. We're moving in the right direction. I don't know if this horse has run its best race yet. The blinkers on. I like that move because the horse can pass other horses. We've seen that happen. The horse doesn't need the lead necessarily. I think it's there to keep the horse focused because if you watch last time, the horse just kind of all of a sudden stopped running in the middle of the race and then kind of re-engaged and started running again. And this happens with Pletcher horses. We saw this with Tappet Trice. We saw this with Mo Donegal. We've seen this even with Fierceness at times where they'll just lose interest sometimes in the middle of a race and there's a little bit of immaturity. I think this one could continue to improve. Irad Ortiz Jr. stays up on the mount. He's ridden this horse every race of his career. And again, I think this is one who can move forward a little bit. And if it can prove off that 89, the blinkers added, should be sitting a somewhat forward trip. I think has some potential. And I know it was on not in your top 4, but it's probably going to be in your late pick 5 ticket.
Yeah, this is the only horse that I included in my pick 5 ticket outside of my top 4. Because I think this one, I mean, is improving just like you said, and it's pretty interesting, pretty big price on the morning line too, I think, for his ability. So I'm kind of curious what you'll get on him come post time, but definitely a horse that I was kind of nervous to leave off my ticket. So it looks like he's heading in the right direction, but that Furio at 12-1, a horse I left off my pick 5 ticket. I hope I don't regret it because I've been talking about this horse a little bit, has a little bit of sneaky pedigree. Is a McKinsey, I think is obviously going to appreciate stretching out, has really good speed as well, and is improving. So this was another one, honestly, I took a look at as a little bit of a long shot. Yeah,
you did some really interesting research on the dam side with this, that you noted that the full sibling, who's a year younger than Furio, sold for $900,000, and now the mare is in full to, was it Tappet or Curlin? I think it's Tappet.
Tappet.
Yeah, it's in mare to Tappet.
Right.
And so, you know, clearly they have high opinions of what this mare is producing. And Furio is the first one to come out of this. So a horse could be moving in the right direction. Faded last time, kind of getting onto the lead. So we'll see if this one can kind of just build up more foundation in this next race. But a horse that beat Furio that day was a horse that you have in your top 4, which is instant replay for Brad Cox. This one running a 92 buyer speed figure last time out with the help of Lasix. But it's second back from a little bit of a freshening as well. Yeah, and obviously I think needed probably Lasix that day coming back off a layoff. And I think this horse seemed to improve a lot off of that layoff. And clearly something happened between now and then, and the horse is headed in the right direction. So I put this horse 4th, maybe as one that should come picking up pieces at the end as well. No, absolutely. This one can come from off the pace a little bit, and actually both wins have come from off the pace. So can sit a little bit of a trip behind that speed, and I think could sit a very comfortable trip depending on how things play out here. Well, that is what we see in the Louisiana Derby and over at Fairgrounds, but let's head to Turfway Park, talk about that Bourbonette Oaks. And this is a race where, you know, it's funny. I remember we watched the race, the Cincinnati Trophy last time. And I said, man, is White Rocks a play against in this race? And, you know, White Rocks got to the lead and got such an easy lead that day and ended up holding on. But the crazy part is there's not a lot of pace in this race outside of White Rocks again, but I think you and I are both trying to go in a different direction. Yeah, I think so. Obviously, that horse got loose up on the front end in the Cincinnati Trophy. A horse that I really wanted out of that race was the number 3, Met, who actually passed White Rocks on the gallop out, which I don't read like too heavily into that. But when you're talking about maybe a horse that can get herself into the mix a little bit earlier this time around, or gets a little bit of a different setup, I think there's going to be some more speed in here maybe. So I think Admit is a really interesting filly. She's sired by Blame. Notably, there's been a few Blame fillies that have either been on the Oaks Trail and have run well in the synthetic, like Wet Paint, for example. They tried her on the synthetic. She was on the Oaks Trail, and then Epic Ride, who obviously is a colt, but sired by Blame as well, who ran on this synthetic. And I always love a Blame filly, and this one I think fits buyer speed figure wise. Claiborne, bred and owned. So this one I think probably is going to run a better race than we saw last time and maybe be able to pass White Rocks. Yeah, I think it's going to get a little bit of a better setup, going a little bit longer. You and I both have Admit up top. We actually have the exact same exacta, which is funny because we don't talk about this stuff ahead of time. So when you sent me your picks, I was like, oh, that's funny. But yeah, I mean, this one's been training beautifully for Tom Drury Jr. I think is going to get a better setup because, to your point, you could see a horse like Just Ruthless maybe sending along with White Rocks. Maybe a horse like Will Then even has a little bit of speed if that horse enters. So I just have a hard time thinking that the jockeys are going to let Victor Carrasco get up on the front end as loose as he did last time. And again, that was at a mile and they were making up ground. So now we're going a little bit longer. And I don't know if the same tactics are going to work for White Rocks. I think Admit at 9-2 makes a lot of sense there as an alternative. But a horse that you and I both have second here is the horse that is cross-entered, but is likely going to be running here in the Bourbonette Oaks rather than the Fairground Oaks. And that is Bless the Broken at 10-1 for trainer Will Walden. Johnny Velasquez up on the mount, trying synthetic for the first time. But this horse has been working over the synthetic and really seems to make a lot of sense here. Last time out, finished third in that Rachel Alexandra.
Yeah, I really like this filly a lot. I think this is a better spot for her than obviously the Fairground Oaks. I even thought she could have been competitive in there.
Yeah, I agree.
So, you know, she's obviously trying synthetic for the first time, but the dam side does suggest that this horse should take to the synthetic. What's interesting is the only other sibling to race is sired by Uncle Mo, so same, sire line cross, and they tried that one on the synthetic as well. I don't really think that she ran poorly. I need to check my notes, but I know the dam side is turf, so and clearly these people are pointing. Yeah, she tries. Well, they tried her on the synthetic. I don't really.
But she was on the turf for a little bit. Yeah, I mean, but they tried that move, and I think she's a horse that's been working on the synthetic as well. I think that's the other thing is Will Walden's been able to see how she moves on the synthetic. Yeah. And clearly they like her on that surface to keep her here rather than to ship her down, where I agree. She would have been competitive in an underneath sort of a capacity, I think, against Good Cheer in that Fairground Oaks. But I think she's a win contender here in a way that she probably wouldn't have been a win contender down in New Orleans. And so, she makes a lot of sense. She's going to be sitting that similar trip to Admit. Honestly, if she can sit a trip, sitting maybe, mid-pack, just a little off the pace, she's got a little bit of speed to be able to sit a little bit closer, mid-pack sort of a trip as you saw in the Demoiselle. And so, this is one who only has that one win, but I do feel like it's sitting on a nice effort and has been running against, quite frankly, better competition than what we've seen. I mean, whether we've seen a horse like Amrath, who's a nice horse that this one ran against, Simply Joking, Muhima, Good Cheer. I mean, these are all really good horses. Balladurina Doro, Drexel Hill. These are all horses that have significant points on the Derby trail, or the Oaks trail, I should say. So I think Blessed Broken at 10-1 makes a lot of sense here. We talked about White Rocks. You have her third. I have her fourth. I flip a coin. I think, we both have her kind of more underneath. But she could get loose up on the lead again. And, she showed a lot of determination to win that race in gate-to-wire fashion. And I think she could be a little bit gritty and try to dig in here towards the end. But to me, I'm going to be playing against her on my tickets.
Yeah, I put her third. I think, obviously, she's going to go to the front end. And I see those two passing her in the late stages of the race. I don't think that she's going to be able to get away and get loose like that. I think that Admit is probably going to be trying to pressure her a little bit, moving earlier on her, whatever the case may be. But I have her third. She's going to play a major role, but I just don't see her getting the same setup.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing her getting the same setup as well. And it's just not going to, I refuse to believe that the jockey colony is going to let this happen. One of the other horses is going to send, or they're not going to let her get 8 lengths clear, or Carrasco is going to maybe try to rate a little bit more and just keep her more kind of closer to the rest of the pack, which of course then brings everybody else into the race. So, I just don't see this kind of playing out the exact same way for White Rocks, who's your 3-1 morning line favorite. But a horse that you and I both also like in this race a little bit is Something About Her. For trainer Brendan Walsh, this one finished third in that Cincinnati Trophy, does have a grade 3 win over the synthetic up at Woodbine. And this one's going to be coming from a little further back. But again, I think as a horse that if there's a little bit more pace could really develop.
Yeah, I think that this one, I honestly think I should have a little bit higher even. I think that she should improve here. Yeah. It's her second start over the Turfway track. She won a grade 1, her first try on the synthetic. Yeah. And the
grade 3. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, grade 3. Yeah. That's my mistake. Yeah. But a grade 3 there, it's really the same caliber of fillies that she's facing here today. So I think that she fits well with this group, and I think she's honestly a win contender.
I do too. No, I think she is as well, and should be a fun running of the Bourbonette Oaks. And we're gonna go from that to the Jeff Ruby Stakes. And don't give me any grief about how this is spelled, because it is indeed about the Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. And so the Jeff Ruby Stakes going 1.125 miles for 3-year-olds on the synthetic, a field of 12, and again, this is a race that feels very wide open. Your morning line favorite is Poster for Owen Hardy. But you and I, again, because we watched some of these races together, you and I watched that Battaglia, which was a race that was dominated up front by California Burrito and Baby Max. There was one horse that was making up ground that day, and it was Maximum Promise. And we said, man, that's the horse I want next time out. Not surprisingly, you and I both ended up choosing that horse next time out for Kenny McPeak, 5-1, the number 10 horse in this race, Frankie Dettori up on the mount.
Yeah, I think that this one is sitting on a big race. Last time out, honestly, had a really difficult start as well.
Yeah.
It still finished up very well. So, yeah, I think this one is sitting on a pretty big race and is going to improve second time trying out this track. So, and also with the pedigree as well, I think that this horse is just going to continue to improve. And obviously, I think took a liking to the surface at Turfway, and I think is sitting on a big one.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this horse is really sitting on a nice race. And what's so interesting is you look at the running lines of this horse. First race was on the turf. Second race was, the maiden breaking victory. Third race was over a wet track in the LeCombe. Then you go to the Battaglia. And like I said, didn't even have the best start necessarily. So going to be fun to see kind of how this one ends up playing out. You and I both like a couple of other horses in this race. The number 6, Baby Max, is a horse that I think is certainly more than capable of running a big race out after getting that 91 buyer speed figure. Blinkers come on. This one could be even more forward in this race for Kelsey Danner. But then the horse that you really like is the number 8 Innovator for Dwayne Lucas. This is a horse that ran a huge race in the LeCombe and nearly won that race gate to wire fashion. Came back a little bit more disappointing in the Rebel, but didn't really get the best race trip and setup that day.
Honestly, I was so tempted to pick this one on top. At 15-1, I think this one is the fastest horse in the race. Whether it translates to the synthetic is, the big question mark. But I was really tempted to put this one on top. But the Dam Side has a heavy turf influence. This one is faster than any other horse in the race. If he's able to break cleanly, he might even take them gate to wire. I don't know, but
he could.
Someone I wouldn't leave off of my ticket. And obviously they're sending him here for a reason. So I think stretching out a little bit in distance as well is going to help this one, and seems to be improving. Not really in the running lines, but that Dwayne Lucas horses are
right. They build that foundation up over time, and we saw it with Maximum Promise or American Promise last week. Absolutely could continue to improve. Now, listen, if it feels like we're rushing through the Jeff Ruby Stakes, we are, because our human resources department, of course, decides to book this room that we're recording in literally every single day. So we really appreciate them for doing that and making our job so much easier here at Aqueduct. But that being said, like I said, we both see Maximum Promise as kind of the primary win bet. I think a horse like Poster is one that I think could certainly make a little bit of a move. We saw, if John Hancock wins that Fairgrounds, the Louisiana Derby, that would certainly flatter Poster, who finished just behind John Hancock and Owen Almighty in that Sam F. Davis. So I think there's a couple of ways to go there, but I think Kaylie and I are both going to try to catch a little bit of a price with Maximum Promise in this race. So we're going to wrap it up there ultimately. But listen, folks, appreciate you all tuning in to this episode of The Road to the Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks. For Kaylie Shapiro, my name is Matthew DeSantis. Wishing you a great and profitable day at the races, and reminding you to make sure to reserve a conference room so that you can record your videos in the future, but also that it's now post time.